Hello, everyone. This is Space Cafe Podcast, and I am Marcus. They are watching us out there right now. It's semi-funny, but well, you know what I'm talking about. The ever-growing eye in the sky that's scanning the Earth as we speak. Not Sauron style, but well, the jury is still out what style it will be someday. Fact is that just like James Webb is aligning its mirrors to sharpen its eyes on distant objects, we are aligning our eyes in the skies on ourselves. There is a gigantic global mirror up there, granting insights into our own home as never before. Earth observation is a thing, a very big thing. It helps track down illegal fishing evildoers on the high seas or tell us how our crops are coming. As always, it's the use that makes the case. So let's talk Earth observation then, will we? Stephen Ramage is my guest today, diplomat, Chief Engagement Officer at the Group on Earth Observations, GEO. It took us a moment to get us going in the first place. Stephen is way too busy highlighting the role of Earth observation on behalf of more than 100 UN member states to have the right equipment ready for the chat. Listen for yourself.
No. I never ever use headphones. I'm just trying to think if I have any. Headphones. Hang on a sec. Nina, hang on, I have to check. I never use headphones. You've thrown me. I have never ever worn headphones. My wife's trying to find me some. Is it really that bad? One. But will it go? Does it fit in now? What? Test. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. I can hardly hear you. Where's the volume? Testing. Okay. No, I've got you. All right. Thank you.
So now that that's been sorted out, there's nothing standing in the way of a wonderful crisp hour. Let's go.
Okay. So my name is Stephen Ramage. I am a Scotsman who is living just outside Geneva, across the border in France. And I guess I'm a geospatial professional is probably the best way to describe me. And I work for...
Wonderful. How does it feel as a Scotsman in Geneva?
It feels pretty good. I mean, you know, it's slightly more expensive than Scotland for pretty much everything. And it's definitely a lot more international. I mean, it's like you struggle to find someone who's actually Swiss in Geneva. But no, it's fine. I've been working here almost I'm in my 6th year now, so I'm getting used to it.
Oh. Wow. So sorry, I was interrupting you. You were gonna say who you work for.
Yeah. So I work for the Group on Earth Observations, which is known as GEO.
Wonderful. So you were already mentioning initially your job description. You know what I like about the 21st century? It comes up with the craziest, unthinkable job descriptions, especially when it comes to the digital age and the digital era. So you have like your ethical hackers, and you have like your whatever job descriptions. So when it comes to your job description, I came on your LinkedIn profile. There's a bunch of interesting terminologies that I tried to hack together. So what does a diplomat in Earth observation data analytics do all day?
So, do you know, it's funny you asked that, because I just wrote down what I've done in the last 24 hours. And I wrote down Google Earth Engine, South Africa, UAE, Austria, Ghana, mentoring, Egypt, South Korea, Senegal, World Economic Forum, Costa Rica, biodiversity, OGC, Sweden, Lacuna Fund, Esri, CEOS, GeoGlam, GeoBond, Digital Earth Pacific, and interviews. So that's kind of like the last 24 hours of my day. Mostly what I'm doing is trying to help the countries that we work on behalf of, is about 115 countries, to really get value from Earth observations. And for us, Earth observations are sensors in, on, and around the Earth. So it's not just space-based data. It's also looking at models and in situ data and things like citizen science.
Fascinating. So, for the layperson, Earth observation somehow sounds like we're holding up a mirror to ourselves. Is that too far-fetched?
No, I think that's a really nice way to describe it. I mean, we are looking at representations of the Earth and measuring and monitoring activity on the Earth using these different sensors in different parts of the Earth. So it could be in the ocean, it could be in the atmosphere, the troposphere, different areas where we can find ways to measure things like surface reflectance, or it's all linked with our planet. So I think the way you describe it is very useful.
So, what's the current state of Earth observation? So, what can we see? So, I guess the usual question you would be confronted with is, can you see my license plate from orbit?
Yeah, I mean, yes, you have very high resolution data that can be used for all sorts of purposes. There's a couple of people on Twitter always joking about, the big breakthrough business case is being able to pick cars in car parks from space. The work that we do is more about using freely and openly available data. So there are a number of programs that have been running probably for about 15 years now. The open data program with the Landsat data from the United States of America. And then, in the last decade or so from Copernicus, the European program with the Sentinels. So we're looking more of our work is not about trying to do that. Well, it's getting there. Let me step back. We're covering a number of different thematic areas or application areas, which could be agriculture, biodiversity, climate disasters, energy, forestry, land, water, urban, all those areas. And depending where you are and what result you want to achieve, then obviously you need to have sort of different types of resolution, whether it's spatial resolution. So, when you talk about people looking at something
Sure.
the size of a football pitch, or looking at something the size of a car. And then different bands that give you spectral resolution, and then the number of times the satellite actually flies over, which is the temporal resolution. So we're looking mostly at these environmental areas and sort of monitoring the pulse of the planet. And as you get into areas like the urban area, where you do need to have the higher resolution to get into the building level and to see what's happening, then that's where we tend to use more of the private sector data. So we have organizations like Planet, who have just become what's called an associate of GEO.
So if I wanted to hide somewhere on the surface of the Earth, is there a place where you wouldn't find me?
Well, then it depends how you define surface. I mean, you could go inside caves. You could, hide. You could go into the water and put little straws.
Okay, I'm not going underground.
But well, I mean, the whole world is covered, and as now as we have different types of sensors coming in, we can see you. We can see you better now through the different types of sensors. And now you have things like synthetic aperture. You have radar, which basically people know is radar. And you can see, we can see better through clouds. We can see better at night. The technology is staggering. I mean, I think what a lot of people forget, because most of the people I work with are extremely clever. I think they forget how complicated this stuff is they do, with mathematics, with physics, with chemistry, with biogeochemistry, with all of these different sciences coming together. And then you have like IT and you have cloud services. It's mind-boggling.
Stephen, is the footage we keep getting from space, is that stills, photo stills, or is it already going into the direction of streaming video footage from space, real-time video footage?
Some people are now doing video. I'm not really that familiar in this area, but there are for sure a number of companies that have just raised funding to do that. In fact, I follow some of them on Twitter. I just can't remember the names of them.
For moving images.
Yeah, so for sure that's definitely an area.
Fascinating.
I think one of the things in terms of the actual images that come, the time now has improved dramatically in terms of capturing the image and then being able to do that processing and all of the different calibration, validation things that need to be done.
Sure.
It's just, like I said, the whole thing is mind-boggling. But we don't really, the science and the technology is not really, it's not really where we focus in GEO. We have organizations like CEOS, the Committee on Earth Observation Satellites, and we work with them and we work with the private sector. So, I mentioned Esri and Planet and Synergize and all of these kind of guys, development. These are all the people we would rely on to do the technical and the technology stuff. The focus for us is taking the science and the technology and kind of putting it more into a policy arena and then trying to drive decisions and action based off of that.
Where do you source your data from? So who owns those satellites?
Well, most of the work we do is around, we call it open knowledge, which is like open data, open standards, open science. And so the data that's coming in is really from the countries that have been working with GEO for almost 2 decades. So that would be data coming from like ALOS, which is Japan, or from Landsat, I mentioned, from USGS and NASA. So sorry, the United States. Then you have the European Commission and European Space Agency with the Sentinels. We have people using the ComSat data for Korea. I mean, it's a huge amount of data from around the world, essentially. I think what's changing is, you talked about ownership. I think one of the things we're seeing more and more of is this kind of digital public good and these entities coming together from the public and the private side to work on these public-private partnerships, PPP.
So for example, you were mentioning Japanese satellites, for example. So why would they give you, or are you paying for that data? But you were also mentioning open source and public data. So are you paying for it? And if not, why would the Japanese give you their technology for free?
Well, there's a couple of ways of looking at it. I mean, one is the business case for the Landsat program, which was making, I think it was something in the region of tens of millions of dollars. The business case for making it freely and open and available was in excess of $1 billion. So in terms of the global community benefit. And then if you look at Copernicus, which has followed on, there are now even more business benefits and case studies for using this data this way. And even, I mean, at one of our meetings in Australia in 2019 in Canberra, there were announcements from China and Japan that they were working on open data policy for the Gaofen and for the ALOS satellites, respectively. So countries are understanding that, the benefits, the short-term benefits of some small revenue versus the much broader public good is, the argument doesn't really equate. But the digital public good that I was talking about is where you have organizations. So, for example, the Norwegian government, through the Norwegian Climate and Forest Initiative, NIGFI, they have spent something in the region of $45 million to work with Kongsberg Satellite, so KSAT, Airbus, and Planet. And the three of them are working together on this tropical deforestation initiative where the data or these mosaics are being provided as a digital public good for something like, I think, 65 or 70 countries. And I hope that we're seeing more and more of that. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we want to work on because we want, traditionally or historically, a lot of the data is made available for research or non-commercial purposes. And we're seeing some changes now coming in as people are trying to be more creative to get around that and think about other ways of providing the data. And that's not just satellite data. I mean, that's also looking at things like drones and, who pays for collecting that data and then managing that data and then distributing that data. And what, once you've paid for that data, what's the use case for using it? So that's why the definition of Earth observations is quite broad for us. We were interviewed yesterday by the Swiss television. It's called Le Monde Bleu. And one of my French colleagues was speaking about LiDAR. So there are so many different ways of capturing, data and information about the planet. And what we're trying to do is find ways to harness that under this open knowledge umbrella that I was sort of describing.
Do you have a direction where all this could lead? If you were asked to direct it in a direction, where would you go with it?
So we have this small thing called climate change, and I mean. Everything's connected, right? The water we drink, the water that plants use, that provides the the life to the soil that supports the biodiversity and the trees, and all of this stuff is connected. And so, looking at climate change in itself. Which is broken down into, greenhouse gases, and then so we call mitigation and then adaptation, all these different things that are under the Paris Agreement. If you look at what just came out of the group, the body of scientists called the IPCC, I'm not going to go into the acronym, but those are the world leading climate scientists who've created these summaries for policymakers. And they've sort of recognized that something called maladaptation, where people are doing what they think is helpful, but actually it's not helpful. I think using Earth observations to inform all of these different areas that are interconnected and somehow integrated is kind of where we're trying to go with GEO. And I think it's where we should be going. And if you look at the investments that are going into these special acquisition companies that are basically like raising funds for the Earth observation private sector. Many of them are going into the area of environmental and social governance. And so all of that, plus looking at things like biodiversity and ecosystem collapse, looking at pollution, particularly looking at different types of particulate matter that it's called PM2.5, PM10. We have some work on, we have something called EO for health. So that there are all these different activities. But I think broadly everything comes back to what we're trying to do in terms of saving humanity and saving, the health of the planet at the same time.
Fascinating. Speaking of saving, and maybe saving lives, is there the current Ukraine-Russia crisis, is there something special in your work at the moment that is of particular interest to you when it comes to Earth observation?
No, I mean, we don't really do anything intelligence or in that arena. I mean, all countries in the UN are welcome to GEO and they all participate. So, I mean, the broader community is using Earth observations for a number of different purposes, but it's not really the work of GEO to do that.
Sure. Do you have a personal favorite data stream you sometimes catch yourself to secretly watch? Is there something you like particularly much about Earth observation?
It's beautiful. It's stunning. I mean, you have some people, again, who are, I'm not sure if it's Landsat who they do like they sort of do art, Earth observations as art. It might be through USGS or through NASA. Copernicus, they have the Copernicus archives. You have people like Iban Amestoy, I probably crucified his name, Pierre Marcuse. You have all these people who are like putting out these really beautiful images. And we just ran an art competition at the end of last year. And, we got people submitting stuff. We had I think a 7-year-old girl, and then we had someone who was like retired in their 70s. So like real huge age gap, some beautiful, beautiful art that came in. Some people did drawing, some people built things, some people just presented Earth observations, So yeah, I mean, I could spend ages just going through, and there's stuff I'd love to buy. I'd love to have more of the actual Earth observations, like what's produced as the final product, around my apartment. But I think I might. I probably wouldn't be allowed to do it.
I find it personally very fascinating to sometimes see how the Earth is changing, especially when it comes to deforestation, because you have it right in front of you, black and white. There used to be forest, now there is none. There used to be pristine wildlife and pristine nature, now there's none. So I think this is the ultimate proof from space. The mirror we were talking about, we're holding up right in front of you, that something is changing. And maybe this is also one of the selling points and the magic behind Earth observation, if I understand that right. Because we can see glass clear that something is changing on this planet.
So that kind of goes to the environmental, social, and governance stuff I was talking about. You have a lot of people who are now trying to monitor supply chains, or if you look at like where food originates and the cost of that food, and then shipping it to different places, all of that, it has a huge impact on transportation, on the supply chain itself is very complicated. But I think with COVID, people are now starting to understand what that means. For me, with Earth observations, everyone, many people for a long time have talked about insights and intelligence from Earth observations. And for me, I think it's now about evidence. So I try quite hard to think about what is that evidence. My former director, Gilberto Camara, he was involved in reducing deforestation in the Amazon in Brazil back in probably 2008. And so he was at the GEO Secretariat as my boss for 3 years. And I learned a huge amount from him about, the science and the technology and what's happening there. But it seems like it's sort of reverted and, we're in a situation now where actually there's more, instead of sort of CO2 being taken in, it's actually, it's going negative. So it is changing. It's absolutely changing. And I think that the issue, this is kind of why I was saying we don't spend so much time on the technology and science, because the policy and the political side of things are really the most challenging part, to be honest. And so we're trying to use that evidence and to work with the different agencies to support global policy frameworks that would help. So, for example, we have an activity called GFOI, Global Forest Observation Initiative, which is working on reducing deforestation and degradation. It's called DREAD Plus. And they have been making progress, and they have methods and tools and everything to provide the forestry data and information. But it's not always easy to get the politicians and others in the countries to acknowledge and to use and to, in the age of fake news and misinformation, many politicians will just choose to accept or, interpret things how they want.
Sure. Is there maybe a good example you could give us where Earth observation led to change on the planet?
Oh, I mean, there's like hundreds of examples, thousands of examples. I mean, the things that we are, we're just about to issue a report for one of the programs we have called Digital Earth Africa, which covers the whole continent of Africa. So we can provide, one of the ways of sharing the data is through our method called water observations from space. So we can provide that water data on a sort of 3-4 daily basis. One of the other activities has been looking at mining. So, look at mining activity in Ghana and what does that mean? What's the impact of that mining? In Uganda, we have one of the other programs is called GEO, which stands for Global Agricultural Monitoring. And in 2017, they were able to use the Earth observations to predict where there was going to be a situation of drought, which would then have an impact on livelihoods and obviously the development of crops. And so the office of the Prime Minister in Uganda was able to trigger the disaster risk financing from the World Bank, the DRF. And as a result of doing that, they were able to act quickly. So this is where anticipatory action and being able to do things like early warning and the crop monitoring, bringing all of that together is really where the big value comes. So yes, we can monitor and measure and report on biodiversity, on climate, on these different areas. But if it's not linked to things like finance or capacity development or action on the ground, then then we're kind of sitting on a gold mine that's not really being used.
Sure. So where do you think is technology, still imagery, becoming moving images? We're talking about hyperspectral LiDAR. What else can we expect from Earth observation?
There are things like high altitude platforms, and there are many different ways that people are collecting and gathering information at different heights, if you want, for the layperson. And I think you'll see more of those different sensors. There are you see people coming in to the sector like Virgin and others who have deep pockets and who have other types of satellites that they may try to repurpose for use. I also think if you look at, I mean, there will be a lot of changes in the sensors and actually it's probably a 2-hour podcast in itself if you look at what NASA's doing with India or you look at, what's happening in the private sector. But I think equally as important is what's happening with the sort of the processing of those images, of those data and information, the way to take these huge amounts of data, for the listeners who understand, the petabytes that are now available just from Copernicus alone.
Fascinating.
The historical data, for Landsat, it goes back to 1972. That's when they started. So there are huge amounts of data. We've got to manage the data. We've got to store the data, distribute the data, parse the data, make sense of the data. And there are things coming out the other end now where, you talked about mirroring the Earth. There are now these things, the concept of things like digital twins. So I remember when I worked for the British government a decade ago, we were looking at this from a sort of building perspective and looking at these digital twins for things like building information modeling. And now it's gone, maybe it's always been there, but I've only noticed it in the last 18 to 24 months that it's really moving into the environmental space as well. And so now you have programs like Destination Earth coming out through the European Commission with EUMETSAT and ECMWF and the European Space Agency. ECMWF is the European Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, just to make sure I cover all the acronyms. But they are now providing these different ways of looking at the Earth and looking at scenarios and modeling what we're doing. And so we have so much information that can go into these different models today. And, there was a new, the beginning of this week, there was GOES-T, GOES-T, which has gone up from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Sorry for all these acronyms.
No, go ahead.
But basically, the big weather agency, this space weather, they've put it up to cover the West Coast, Hawaii, and Alaska, and that's just gone up. And so it is, and I think Steve Volks, who is on our executive committee and I think he's an assistant secretary at NOAA, he said, this covers 1 billion people. So you have to think about, it's your question, can you see me anywhere on Earth? I mean, we do want to see people anywhere on Earth. It might be for transparency and accountability, but it might also be to help save them, or save our, our planet itself.
You know what? Speaking of the data onslaught you were mentioning, I have a little guessing game. If you're in, are you good at guessing?
Absolutely rubbish.
Okay, let's try.
I love Trivial Pursuit.
Let's try something. So let's try to imagine what an exabyte of data is, because we know it's very much. So let's find out what that could mean. So if we estimate that 1 megabyte equals the size of an ant, okay? 1 megabyte equals the size of an ant. How big is an exabyte? What do you think? A tree, a house, a country? What do you think?
This is great because this is going to give all my friends a good chance to make fun of me. I would say it is the size of a very large crude carrier, a VLCC.
Okay, good. Close. Not even. So, 1 megabyte, the size of an ant. 1 gigabyte, the height of a person. 1 terabyte, the length of a pretty long bridge. A petabyte, the distance from the north to the south of New Zealand, for example. 1 exabyte is the diameter of the sun. The diameter of the sun. So now, Stephen,
But I was talking
are...
about the total volume and
So now, Stephen, there's an estimate by the World Economic Forum about global data production for 2025. And there's an estimate that we will be producing 463 exabytes of data per day. So 463 diameters of the sun per day. So, I mean, like, it's clear that we are super overwhelmed with all of this. So my question would be, Stephen, who digs through that data? Who can make sense of what is coming down from that mirror we were talking about?
So it's funny because I know we've done some work with Amazon Web Services on sort of cloud credits for the countries we work, least developed countries, and the woman who was running that, Teresa, she went to work for a company called Splunk, Splunk, and I'd never heard of Splunk, and so I looked them up. They're $3 billion. And they are just taking data in as unstructured data, and they are working through all of these different data types. And I think there's going to be more and more Splunks and those types of organizations that are just making sense of data. And I think this is interesting because the amount of geospatial data, as you've explained, is growing exponentially. And as we get more funding for more of these private sector companies who put up more satellites, who produce more data, I mean, at some point, we'll run out of people to use that data, and there's going to be so much data. So that's why I was talking about parsing the data, and you're never going to be able to use all of the data that's available. So you have to think about when. I mean, it is amazing that if we do need the data for anywhere, pretty much at any time, we can get that data. We can go to Planet or whoever and say, we need this data for this time, or satellites can be tasked from whoever. But I think that, as was probably your point, that's probably a bigger issue than where the technology itself is going, because the technological advancements are amazing. They're staggering, and everything is going really, really fast, and people are managing to achieve stuff that I'm guessing people who were working in Earth observations 30 years ago probably didn't really imagine. Even I was talking to someone from NASA about some of the work looking at plastic pollution, plastic in the ocean, and actually trying to look below the surface of the ocean using satellites. So
fascinating.
You can only go so far, but all these changes, all these things, but because of our human activity, we're being forced to try and monitor these things. And I should say, at the United Nations Environment Assembly, I think yesterday or the day before, there was an agreement that there will be a policy on plastic pollution, a global policy. So
yes,
that's a big step forward as well, that everyone's in agreement that this is a huge problem.
Stephen, where is Earth observation headed, where it is a Google Earth in real time, for example. I know that there are different layers of Earth observation, but I mean, like for the layperson to make it understandable and graspable, Earth observation is associated with what we're seeing here on Earth, with our eyes, with our senses, our primary senses. So do you think we're going to see some kind of Google Earth in real time, where we see cars move around and people walk around?
Well, I mean, if you think about the fact that you now have LiDAR on an iPhone, I know there are people. There's a younger guy called Joe Morrison who is sort of Scottish. I think he's one of his parents are Scottish, so we got on quite well. And Joe is one of the people who sort of like is pushing hard. And it's good because he's in the industry side of things and he can help make these things happen. I think to get towards the stage where we do have this stuff essentially where you can pick a package, you can just pay whatever you want, and you can get this at some point on your phone. We're not there yet, but that's where we're going to. So, the famous word that everybody uses is democratization, which I find hilarious. It's like the word interoperability. They're just big, long, sort of meaningless words to my parents or the people that we want to benefit. So I think just being able to make it simple and accessible, if we go that direction, then I think it will happen. But I'm not sure it will be the industry that will make it happen. It will be some company like Splunk or someone else who just decides, we've got enough customers here that need this service. Let's just put a bit of time and energy into it. And, they'll maybe hire some of the top Earth observation scientists and some other geospatial brains and just make it happen. If you look at like the work that Uber has done and the work that Microsoft have done, these organizations have done some significant work around really complex subjects to make it really easy for us to use services like, being able to order a car if we want to go somewhere on our mobile phone. So, it's all driven by market need, I think. I don't see that changing particularly much.
Okay. So how many satellites are there in orbit? Could you give us a rough estimate when it comes to Earth observation?
Oh man, I've seen these numbers so many times. I don't know. It's over 1,000. It's got to be over 1,000. I mean, Planet have something like 220 or more of their own. So plus all the. I really don't know. I mean, that's what I'm saying to you. I don't get tied up in this stuff because I don't really need to know this. If I ever go back to the private sector, then I'll swap up. But even then, for me, I prefer what it enables. I prefer the evidence, the value, the results, the impact. That's really where I like to be. Because that's the most meaningful part.
Sure, absolutely. I was going to say the evil world thing that really you should be worried about because you're working with the data from the satellites, but space debris is an issue ultimately. Yeah,
I mean, the people like, organizations we work with, like the, UNUSA or ESA. I'm an advisor to the UK Space Agency. They're very concerned about space debris. Even the private sector guys. I mean, everybody's definitely concerned about it. There's the Secure World Foundation. They're one of our partners. I know they do stuff in this area, and they run. I think it's called the Space Summit. So yeah, there are lots of people in our network who do it, but yes, it's not something we've got enough to focus on just with the work that we have to do. Oh, never mind adding space debris on top.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Stephen, one last question. As a Scotsman, do you drink coffee now and then?
That's a very bizarre question. Yes, I absolutely love coffee. You're
Good.
going to ask me if I take it with my whiskey at night or something?
No, no worries. No, the thing is, we have a traditional last question to all of our guests. And now I'd like to ask you to energize us, to energize the audience with a space espresso for the mind. And here you can pick whatever topic you want to pick you think could be inspirational for people to hear. So what could be an espresso for the mind, an inspiration for our audience?
I think everyone should think about intergenerational communication. Speak to someone who's younger than you or someone who's older than you. You know, share your own experiences, learn from others' experiences, and pay it forward. If you've had people help you, you know, because life is tough, work is challenging, we've all got things going on, and, you know, we all need help at certain times. And so I try really hard to pay it forward by mentoring lots of younger people. And I think if everyone just gives a little bit of their time and help people who are older too, because we all grow older, and you know we shouldn't forget people who are older than us as well. So that would be it. It's a big statement, intergenerational connectivity, but it sounds like Star Wars. But you know, let's work together across the ages.
Wonderful. Stephen, thank you so much for taking the time. That was very inspiring.
Oh, thank you. And by the way, I hope it's fair trade coffee.
It is. Fair trade space coffee.
Fantastic. I applaud you.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. Please do let us know if you would love to hear about a certain topic or would love to propose an incredibly interesting guest to our show. In the meantime, I recommend heading over to the mothership, SpaceWatch.Global. The radios, local cafes, articles will feed your hunger for space. Promised. Bye for now. Till next time, take care.